Good evening and welcome to TalkSports, our weekly sports program where we chat with the movers and shakers in sports, the sportsmen, sportswomen, and administrators, both past and present. Well, as you have been hearing lately and on this program, there is a crisis in boxing in Grenada, and it's our hope that whatever decisions taken in the very near future, that they will be in the best interests for the development of the sport in Grenada. However, this week, our program is taking a broader perspective of the sport in the Caribbean, and particularly the impact situations like Grenada are having on the development of boxing, and particularly in the Caribbean. And basically, to bring the discussion to life, I have invited the president of the Guyana Boxing Association, Mr. Steve Ninvalle, who is also the vice president of the Americas Boxing Confederation. Well, Mr. Ninvalle, well, he joins me live from somewhere in the East Bank Demerara in Guyana, and I welcome Mr. Ninvalle to our program. Good evening, Mr. Ninvalle.
Good evening to you, Michael, and to wherever people are viewing us and hearing us. And I must say thank you on behalf of my association for having me on this program. If you would allow me, I think it's remiss of me if I do not offer my condolence to the wife and family of Johnson St. Louis from Grenada, who was recently died. And I do hope that we can take a standing 8 count for him before we start your program, with your approval, of course.
Certainly, you have that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think the bell have sounded now.
Yes, indeed, it has.
Yeah. All right then. Well, as I said, and it's unfortunate I had to start with actually a situation like the Grenada situation, and
Yes.
and then in addition to that, boxing has not really been spared from the pandemic, and Guyana is one nation that I know has been looking forward to the day when their boxers, for example, could get into the ring again. And so my question to you now is, how has the Grenada, that's the Guyana, GBA, the Guyana Boxing Association, has been able to keep their boxers engaged? And but more importantly, what impact the pandemic has had on boxing in Guyana?
Well, the impact has been severe, right across, and unique to boxing alone. And it is not unique to Guyana alone. I think across the Caribbean, it is being hitting severely. What we would have done within the past year, Guyana would not have had one single competition between March of last year to March of this year, to present, as a matter of fact. Our last competition would have been on February 15th, 2020. Our last international competition that we would have participated at would have been the Caribbean Championships that were held in Trinidad and Tobago in December of 2019. To put it in a nutshell, it has been a physical hit, it has been a mental hit, it has been a psychological hit, it has been a financial hit, and it will take us some time to recover from that. We do hope that, if there is a pooling of resources, that we can get out of this faster. I have been speaking with presidents from across the Caribbean and some presidents in Latin America. And it is the first time that the sport has been down for so long. Just recently, Guyana would have selected a team to go to the World Youth Championships in Poland. And we had to pull the plug on that at the last minute. And this is even though we would have secured all the financing to get our team to Poland. Finances is something that remains a major bugbear. But this time we were able to secure, but we had to pull the plug. On the other hand, we would have just recently the IOC, which was tasked or mandated itself with organizing the Olympic qualifier. The IOC would have had to pull the plug on that Olympic qualifier. It's the first time since there has been a qualifying process in the Olympics that something like this has happened. And it has thrown us into a quagmire because of the fact that there's a very complex system as it relates to the ranking of boxers. And the IOC has said that it will now go to the ranking of boxers. But if you ask the majority of presidents in the Caribbean, if they understand how the ranking system will work, I mean, I myself will have to say, well, no, I'm a bit perplexed. And I do hope that when it comes out, we will be on a better footing in the Caribbean because Guyana of itself, we have not had one boxer qualify for the Olympics in 25 years. In 1996 was the last time that we would have had someone qualify for the Olympics. And we were really looking forward to this, not only for a chance to qualify, but a chance to have our boxers back into competition mode. What happens when you're not in competition mode is that some persons can go astray. And each and every Caribbean nation will tell you that we've had boxers moving far away from the sport because of the fact there's lack of competition. We cannot train properly because we do not know what we are training for and when we are training for it. As a matter of fact, the Pan Am Juniors qualifier was supposed to be held in Colombia. That has now been cancelled. From Colombia, they're looking to have another country that can host this. If you ask me if you will have another country coming forward at this time to host something in June, no, I don't see it happening. So again, in a nutshell, we've been hit severely by COVID-19. We have not been knocked out. We have been knocked down, but we will bounce back.
Yeah, well, I do understand that, and I know that the Guyana situation is not unique to just Guyana
It is not.
because yeah, it's been felt by most of the nations, especially in the Caribbean in particular. I don't think any Caribbean nation, probably except Cuba, might probably represented at the youth tournament.
But if I can say this, you know, Trinidad was slated to hold the AMBC Youth Championship in April. Trinidad is now locked down. Trinidad had to give up the hosting of that. The AMBC Youth Tournament is not being held now. So each and every nation has its issues. Some more severe than some. Guyana is a little more open. We still have flights coming in daily and going out. But Trinidad, one of our top nations in the English-speaking Caribbean as it relates to boxing, they are totally shut down. And it's a severe hit. And after this, you know, some of your main fighters, your main athletes may no longer be in the sport because they're not only not physically prepared, but they're not mentally prepared either. And it will be an arduous task to whip them back into shape and get them back into the fold.
So in the short term, how do you suggest that, you know, sports administrators, boxing administrators in the region, handle these issues?
Well, I think first and foremost, the Caribbean has to have a blueprint of how the Caribbean will handle boxing due to COVID. I think what can happen is that each and every nation can submit what is going on in their neck of the woods, and then we can come up with a collective approach because COVID is going nowhere. It will remain in us. It's not going to be gone next week or next month or the next 5 or 6 months. It's going to remain with us. And I think that it's only opposite that we as a Caribbean come up with a blueprint and how we as a Caribbean will deal with COVID, have our own COVID rules, regulations, and so forth. And this will come through a system of each individual, a nation, presenting their own unique issues as it relates to COVID-19. We pour all of that into a regional pot, store it, and then we come up with our own regional mandates as it relates to that.
All right. Well, I know that folks. There are a lot of folks in the Caribbean who have a very keen interest in the sport of boxing, especially what the sport has brought to, especially young people
Yes.
in the Caribbean. And now we are seeing a lot of women getting involved. The females are getting involved in the sport of boxing. But hit it home, particularly in Guyana now, how much it has affected the young
Females.
people in Guyana. I know you have various regions and various districts that basically involved in boxing. Guyana, boxing to Guyana is like probably any other sport, any other probably I may say probably baseball to the United States.
Yeah, we love it. We love it
Yeah.
here. And there are several reasons before I go to your questions. There are several reasons why we love boxing. Boxing has given us our only Olympic medal, and that Olympic medal that we would have won in 1980 in Moscow remains the only medal that the English-speaking Caribbean has won in boxing at the Olympic. So it's really dear to us in Guyana, boxing as a sport. But you'd ask about the effect that it has on the younger boxers. Just recently, as of Sunday, we have two very, very good young women, Alicia and Abiola Jackman. Abiola was slated to go to Poland, but again, we could not have taken that risk to allow them, with the rising cases in Europe, with several countries being locked down, and some without warning being locked down. And we just came out of a 126-day lockdown of 4 boxers in Cuba. And we, once bitten, twice shy. So that's a risk that we could not have taken. And Abiola would have said to me on Sunday, she said, Mr. Ninvalle, I don't think I want to box anymore. And I turned to her, I said, well, I can only advise you. I cannot force you. I said, but look at this as you're in a fight and you have been knocked down. And because you have been knocked down, you're saying, I don't want to fight anymore. I have lost the fight. That is not the spirit. And I think that is what we as administrators, we have been voted in to do. We have been voted in to give our best without rewards, without financial rewards, without any rewards. But we have accepted, and if you accept the challenge, then you have to fulfill the task. And we have been voted in to do that, to make sure that we can give of our best. And if we cannot give our best, then it is time for us to move aside. So with Miss Jackman, that was me giving of my best from an advisory capacity, and this is it with boxing. If you're president, you also have to play the role of a father figure. You also have to play the role of a psychologist, sometime of a motivator, and all of these things. But I'm glad to say that after we would have had that conversation, and then we would have had another conversation on WhatsApp, that she is fully back into the sport and she wants to do better. She understood where she may have gone wrong. And for me, that is a reward. I've collected a reward there by having her remain in the sport. For some other young people, it's a little more difficult because she has been selected to go to Poland. There are others who have not been selected to go anywhere overseas, but would have to continue training. Continue training, not knowing when a competition is going to present itself, and that alone can be a daunting task. So we have to keep trying to lasso all of these young ones that we have and to keep them sort of interested in the sport. Guyana, as it is right now, we have a COVID-19 task force, and we will have to have permission from that COVID-19 task force before we can do anything, before we can hold a competition, and we have had increasing cases every day. I would want to say that it seems to be a meteoric rise right now in the amount of cases of positive COVID-19 persons. So the COVID-19 task force is really taking a stern look at it. And we, as a nation, we are finding that we are although we are not locked down, but we are moving more and more to a stage where we can be. Boxing is a full contact sport, as you know, and even though we would have received the approval to train, we would not have received the approval to have any competitions. In August, we would have scheduled our schoolboys and juniors tournament, which is an annual tournament. It was started here, and we were supposed to hold it last August, but it was canceled because of COVID-19. We're hoping with the advent of all the vaccines. Right now, there's a tremendous vaccination program being held in Guyana, and we do hope that by August, we'll be able to at least hold a competition. But then again, it's not only about Guyana. Guyana may be open, but my good friends in Trinidad may not be open, and in Barbados, Jamaica, in St. Lucia, in Grenada, may not be open. So how do we host an international competition with maybe Guyana alone, or maybe Guyana and St. Lucia alone if St. Lucia can travel? So that shows that the train effect, the trickle down effect that it has, that while we are open, our sister Caribbean nations are not open or do not have the approval to fly or to come to Guyana. So that of itself is another problem facing us.
Yeah, and it's a headache for administrators. But there's one thing I want to add that you forgot to mention when you said that as president, and how you were able to get that female boxer to stay focused and to change her mind, that you also have to be a mentor yourself,
Yes.
a motivator, everything
Yes.
as a mentor, because others may not have done what you did, and she would have just called it quit,
That is right. That is right.
Yeah,
You can lose, and she's a very good fighter. But
right.
you need to make sure that and you said it correctly, that you be a mentor. And there are other mentors like the coaches and so forth, but you just need to be that other person in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's I know it's a challenge, and it couples with all sorts of factors, including, as you mentioned, the financial factor as well. How Guyana Boxing Association and other regional associations having to cope, keeping boxers in training, for example, to some extent, and without finances.
It's a tightrope that we walk. But I guess that many of the regional leaders are accustomed to walking that tightrope. So it has become a road. It has become as broad as a road because we do this every single year. And the thing is that as the leader of your organization, when things go right, it's everyone. Anytime it goes wrong, it is you. Right? So we have had to do some amount of gymnastics for some time. But the thing is that at the end of the day, we get the job done. I could remember in 2015, we had resuscitated the Caribbean Championship. And we would have held the Caribbean Championship under the name of the Caribbean Development Tournament. We would have held it in Guyana. And for the next 2 years, we were paying off money that we owed for that. But within the next year after 2015, we started up the Caribbean Schoolboys and Juniors Tournament because there was none such tournament in the Caribbean. And, if you don't have a proper nursery, then we can't have proper seniors. And we thought it very appropriate to have the Caribbean Schoolboys and Juniors tournament. And, if we do not shift to having boxing televised and so forth, we will find ourselves in a real financial mess. We are already in a financial mess. And I'm saying this is not unique to Guyana. You ask Barbados, you ask Trinidad, you ask Jamaica, you ask St. Lucia, single country in the Caribbean. And that is why at the opening of the Caribbean Championship in Trinidad, I had stated that boxing needs to be treated better. And, we must collectively as Caribbean nations maybe petition governments in order to have our slice of the cake. Right across the Caribbean, we have found that boxing has done so much for the nation, and we find the people who gravitate to boxing, if we do not have them fully immersed in the sport, they can be giving us some trouble in other areas. So we need to treat boxing a little better.
Yeah, but when you say treat it a little better, I mean, and if you lobbying governments in the Caribbean, what exactly are you requesting? What it is you want? How special you? Well, I shouldn't say special, but how you want to be treated then?
Well, I will say this for one. I think that in my country, what we have done, we have presented 4-year plans. Our 4-year plans would have everything that we will be doing over the next 4 years. Where we intend to go, how we intend to go, what we will need to go. But we have found that every single time, even though you would have presented a plan for 4 years, every single time now that you have to go to a tournament, you have to go back and almost beg. And this is not Guyana alone. Again, I'm telling you, this is across the Caribbean. What does that do to an athlete who is training, who doesn't know or cannot confirm or is not certain or is not confident that we will have the financial resources to send him to the game that he's going to? I don't think we can have. It's a psychological burden. It's a mental burden we are putting on that athlete, as against an athlete who knows for sure that I'm going to the Olympic, that I'm going to go to Azerbaijan and train for 3 months, and everything is taken care of. You see the difference that I'm talking about. So when I say better, I mean that we must have confirmation. If we provide information early, then we should have confirmation early. And we should not have to wait until the last minute. I tell you what, when we host the Caribbean Championship, we ask for registration of athletes. We ask for travel arrangements, travel itinerary to be sent by a certain time. Most Caribbean nations cannot submit to that because of the fact they don't know if they will get this money. And at the last moment, then you will have travel itineraries coming. I tell you what, in 2018, we had, in 2015 rather, we had a Caribbean nation coming to our Caribbean Championship. They're reaching 1 day after it started. 1 day after it started, and because of the fact that the money was late, because you had to run around and kiss this body's foot and beg this other one and so forth. So when I say treated better, this is what I'm talking about. And I'm saying that if you are tardy, if an association or a national federation is tardy, then the federation must be blamed for that. We can't blame anyone else. But if you're not, then we should be treated better.
Yeah, well, it's quite a lot. I know I told you that it's 1 hour we have, and
Yes.
so much to discuss. And you gave me permission to ask you.
Of course, anything.
Anything.
Yes.
There's nothing really restricting us from asking. But
no.
In the news recently, and I say recently, probably a few months ago, it was announced that you resigned as the chairperson of the Caribbean steering committee for
Yes.
steering
Yes.
committee for boxing. First of all, what was this committee about, and why you resigned?
The committee was formed to try to steer what happens in the Caribbean and to have a collective view and a collective input into making the Caribbean a more harmonious region and a more unified region. It is difficult and this is my own personal belief and opinion. At this point in time, it is difficult for the Caribbean to have any sense of unity. We may want unity, but the amount of insularity, the amount of personal interest, the amount of me force, we have moved away from what unity really should be. And it's sad that, as matured administrators, that we are still at this stage. We're still at this stage. I would have left the steering committee because I honestly thought the steering committee was being steered in not the direction that not me alone, several other Caribbean leaders thought was not the direction that they would have wanted. And I think the straw, and I'm being brutally honest here, the straw that broke the camel's back was when I heard that when Mr. Cecil Ford, who is a dear, long-serving, upright administrator of the sport in the Caribbean, when the president of Trinidad could have been disrespected, I called it quits. And again, I think that we as administrators, we need to be matured about what we in the way. And I have seen what I would term as infantile behavior. And I'm not going to point any fingers, but when you could have tried to disrespect Mr. Cecil Ford, I had to throw my hat in. And I do hope that whosoever is leading the Caribbean, first and foremost, must understand that unity is not something that you can force down the throat of anyone. You will have to request, and then you will have to show that there is unity. You cannot bang unity with a hammer. It will not work. It will not work. And again, if you ask me if we have a unified front, no, we do not have. And if we are honest with ourselves, just recently there was an election for the AIBA presidency. The Caribbean was not a unified force. And you can ask why we are not a unified force. Certain people thought that, the IOC wanted this person and the IOC will not have that person, and the IOC and the IOC and the IOC. My point and my opinion is that the IOC cannot solve AIBA's problem. It's just like Guyana cannot solve Grenada's boxing problems. Grenada has to do that. And for anyone else to come in without being elected to solve AIBA's problems or issues, then I think that is being undemocratic. Mr. Umar Kremlev won through a democratic process. But even though he would have won through a democratic process, we're still hearing, oh, the IOC do not want this, and the IOC does not want him, and the IOC wants this. And my point to one regional administrator was that if the IOC wants Steve Ninvalle as the president of AIBA tomorrow, and we do what the IOC says, then who says it's going to stop there? And then they're going to say, I don't want Cecil Ford as the president of Trinidad. And then Cecil Ford has to move. And then they will say, well, I don't want Cathy Harper Hall as the secretary of Barbados. And Cathy Harper Hall has to move. My basic point is that if we do not stand firm on our independence as a sport entity, then anything will go. If my foreparents did not stand up, then I would have still be in the sun cutting canes and getting lashes on my back. We need to stand firm. I'm not saying that we should not be listening, yes, but we must be able, in our own way, in our collective way, solve our problems without outside interference. I will stand for that at all times.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because my question really was whether or not we given too much attention to some of these international, and not just boxing, too much of these international sporting federations, associations, and saying less of what's relevant and rational for our respective countries in the Caribbean. And it's
But
not just
listen,
boxing alone.
it's that, and that is what the point I'm making. It is the fact that every organization will want to have their people in so that it will go to the side that they want it to go. And especially when people are wielding finance, when they can hold it and say, well, okay, I'm not giving AIBA any more money. And okay, yeah, the boxing will be knocked out of the Olympics. And okay, we will not do this. At some point, we have to say, well, we will have to do without rice today, or we will have to do without sugar today. Right? Because boxing issues has to be solved by the national federations in it. Now, if Mr. Umar Kremlev was elected by the majority, that is the person we have to work with. If he was elected through an undemocratic system, then yes, Umar Kremlev should go. But we cannot have him, we can't have our cake and eat it. We cannot have him elected through a democratic process and now turn around and say, oh, but he still mustn't be here because the IOC don't want him. So then let's do everything the IOC wants then. Or whoever is another IOC, let's just bow our heads in the sand and say, give me a list of what you want, and we will do that. I am saying that is puppetry.
But despite your resignation as chairperson of the Caribbean Steering Committee for Boxing, you're still committed to the development of boxing in the Caribbean and Guyana in particular. You're up.
Well, more so Guyana in particular. I will tell you why, and I have to be brutally honest. I've had time in doing everything for the Caribbean and trying to pull the Caribbean together, and I did that at the expense of my boxing association in Guyana. If I'm willing to continue doing that, no. Guyana must come first, and Guyana will come first. I've had my time where I put the Caribbean first. I will tell you what. In 2000, I think it was 2016. I can't remember. I think it was Qatar. We were in Qatar. I was executive committee member of AIBA at that time. And there was a certain decision that was to be made. And all the other executive committee members came to me and said, well, listen, we want you to come with us. And we want you to vote in this way. Because I was a Caribbean man, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I called up most of the senior presidents and boxing administrators in the Caribbean. Cathy Harper Hall being one, Cecil Ford being another one, because these are older heads, you know, these are people who have been there so many years, you know, and they know it inside it out. I would have had conversation with them, and then I went back to my fellow executive committee members, and I said, well, listen, I can't vote with you guys because the Caribbean does not want me to do that. And that, I think, is putting Caribbean. I could have gone and said, well, let me vote however I feel like. without informing the Caribbean. And then when I finished, then say, well, but because of the fact that I put Caribbean first, and this is not a boast, this is just what I did. If you're asking me at this set time, if I am prepared to do that, no, I'm not prepared to do that. I am prepared to put my country, Guyana, first. And when everything is all right with Guyana, then I could go for. I'm saying this because once bitten is twice shy. And I can tell you this also, that there are many other people within the Caribbean who are thinking likewise because of what is going on right now. Because of what is going on, many people are saying, hey, let me deal with my country, make sure that my association is okay, and then I can go forward. I cannot give them wrong for doing that.
Well, and it appears that you always seem to be taking that high road in terms of when it comes to, what you believe is fair, what you believe is correct, and what you believe is honest. Because some time ago you took issue with some of your Caribbean counterparts when an ethics investigation was launched, and you may have been scolded for that. I'm not certain, but you will talk about it because you seem to be the only one who came out and spoke about it, even though it wasn't good. It wasn't fair reported, I would say.
But Michael, if I can say this, I will not be one to be in a corner and suck my thumb and not say anything. I will have to. I care less. It will ruffle feathers. And you're speaking about an incident that occurred. I was suspended from the executive committee because this was something that happened from the Caribbean. And my suspension from the executive committee happened because of Caribbean countries, right? And this is the same unity we're talking about. Now, let me say this. After that suspension, well, I had to get a lawyer and so forth, and it was lifted because I knew it was nonsense, but I knew it was politics too. After that suspension, I was willing, and I did. I said, listen, bygones is bygones. Let's forget that, and let's work with these same countries. Let's work with them. There are people who are still in the hierarchy of what we call Caribbean, whatever group the Caribbean has now, the Caribbean leadership, Caribbean organization, whatever, who had said that we should keep those countries out for 5 years. And I said, well, unity is not exclusive. Unity is inclusive. And we will include, I was at loggerheads with people for bringing back those two countries. As a matter of fact, in October of last year, at my last meeting of the Caribbean Steering Committee, I asked for a vote to bring back one of those presidents into our fold. We had to vote to bring that president back into the fold. So again, all the unity is just talk. It's just talk. And I'm saying to my Caribbean administrators, we need to start doing some serious introspection. We need to start finding out where we are, and we need to start making sure that our national federations are national federations, because at this point in time, there are several national federations that are just shells. And this is calling a spade a spade. There are several national federations that are just shells. There are national federations that have not held elections in how many years? And I'm saying that if you're being democratic, how could you be part of us and you are not in line with what AIBA will ask for? Then you are part of not a solution, but you're part of a problem.
Quite a lot, and for folks who are trying to follow, it had to do with an investigation into some of the Caribbean countries, and I probably will give you a minute or two, Steve, to basically shed some light on exactly the issue regarding these countries. I'm just trying to paraphrase it, but I believe you
Are
in
you
a better
talking about
position.
the last election?
No, the one where the last election, but it had to do with the ethics investigation launch against these
You're
countries.
talking about the ethic. Oh, with the 9
Yeah,
countries.
with the nine countries. Yeah.
What has occurred with the 9 countries is that 9 countries did not pay their dues to AIBA. AIBA has annually, every year, you must pay your fees by a certain time. This is something any administrator worth his salt should know. If you don't pay your fees, then you're not eligible for. So what happened? There was a last minute rush to pay, and one person for all 9. That was reported to the AIBA Ethics Committee. I had said, and I still say, that those Caribbean countries only have themselves to blame. If Trinidad did not pay the fees, then Trinidad can say, well, I blame in Barbados because I didn't pay my fee. If Jamaica didn't pay the fees, they can say, well, I blame in Grenada because Grenada, I think it's just red herrings. So they went to the AIBA Ethics Committee, and I think they were suspended for some time, but they were brought back into the fold. My opinion in this is that we did not do our homework, we, meaning the 9 countries, and they will learn from it. Never again, I think that any Caribbean country will not pay the AIBA fees in time. So, the Bible says, out of evil cometh good. That was something that happened, and you will learn from it. But when I said that, they only had themselves to blame, people thought of it in all kinds of ways. Listen, I am not here to please anyone. I am here to make sure, as I said before, that boxing in my country is run in a certain way. Once my association is up and running, then I can look at any other thing. If you ask me if issues relating to the Caribbean and the Caribbean group and so forth is a priority of mine, no, it is not a priority of mine right now. The Guyana Boxing Association is a priority of mine. Like-minded federations, yes, of course, are welcome to share in whatever we are doing. And I'm saying there are several like-minded federations in the Caribbean. Some may not come out and speak, because what is happening now is that if you speak, you are a traitor, you're a snake, you're this, and all these derogative and disrespectful language is being used against sister and brother CARICOM states and CARICOM administrators. And this is wrong. I have known presidents have called me and they said, well, I don't like what's going on, I really don't like what's going on. And I said, well, then why don't you speak up? Oh, if you speak up, somebody's going to say this on somebody. I said, well, how long are you going to be in the corner and suffering? You should speak up, right? As of yesterday, a president called me and said, well, this was going on and this happened at our last meeting and this is totally wrong. And so I said, did you say anything at the meeting? No, why? But, if you say anything, people will jump down your throats and so forth. So then again, that is why I said, there's a myth of unity, because if you're unified, then you will understand that each and every one has a say. Regardless, people don't have to be saying what you want them to say, but everyone has a right to be heard. And you should not be, which side are you on? And you on this side, and you on that side, and you on the side of boxing. If you are on the side of boxing, you are on the winning side. So it's not that you in this faction or you're in that faction. Are you on the side of boxing? Yes, well, then let's hug and let's move on.
Okay. Well, I guess as much other sports administrators can take a page from your book, because you have been in the trenches. You have been.
But that is where you're supposed to be. That is where you're supposed to be.
Well, some seem to be very timid. And despite what, even though you know that there will be consequences,
yes,
you spoke out, and you faced the consequences. You were suspended, and still you came back, and you still try to get a united bunch, but that's how
Michael,
it goes.
if I can say this,
Mm-hmm.
AIBA now is moving in a different direction. Yes, AIBA had problems, like any household, like any family, like any organization. AIBA has problems. AIBA is now moving in another direction. AIBA has sent, and this is something, as leaders, we will need to be au fait, we will need to understand, we will need to be updated with the new rules and regulations of the body that you come under. We don't come under the Olympic Association. Our governing body is AIBA. So the rules, we will have to follow AIBA rules. We don't have to follow the IOC's rule. We have to follow AIBA's rules. And if you go around and you do it yourself, call administrators and say, you read the rules and say, well, are you okay with section 5 or 10 or whatsoever? Do you know that this has been changed from last year to this year? Or ask a simple question. Could you tell me of the amendments made in the last election? And then you will know who really are the persons who care about this sport, because if you don't know the rules, it will affect you, and by extension, your boxers. Right? So that's, just ask. What are the amendments that were made at the last Congress? Do you know how this will affect you and so forth? And then you will see who are really paying serious interest in the sport or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let me get some comments there from, and then there's a question, Vincent Strawn. Steve, I'm happy to share in this exciting and dynamic show. Looking forward to the opportunity to be back. Rhonda McKenzie, you are doing a great job representing Guyana and the Boxing Association, Mr. Ninvalle, and obviously Stulax is locking in from Europe. But his question to you is, I would like to know what is fundamentally wrong with countries like Guyana when it comes to generally supporting sports and the arts. The boxing potential in Guyana is incredible. What goes wrong? What is going on wrong, Steve?
I think that, and good question from my guy, Stulax. Good morning or good night to you. I think we treat sport on the whole as a second-class citizen. If you look at a child growing up, you will never hear or seldom hear a parent saying, hey, go and pick up your ball or pick up your bat or pick up your gloves. You always say, hey, go and pick up your book. You got to study. So we always look at sport as being second to academics, while sport should be right there with academics. And this is a culture. And changing that culture is an arduous task. It would take some time. I know that in some Caribbean countries, they have seen what sport can do, the spin-offs, but I think that the majority of our nations have a lot of work to do with that. So in bringing sport from that second-class citizen into being the first-class citizen.
Okay. There is the issue as it relates to boxing on television.
Yes.
Boxing, and I say that in the context of your plea to have boxing on the table just as any other sport. Cricket, for example, with regional leaders, they discuss it even at the CARICOM level, but boxing on TV as cricket and football, except it's an international card on pay-per-view TV,
Yes.
How do we get more people watching regional boxing or even local boxing on TV?
Well, boxing has to be a product, and it has to be seen as a product. I remember, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we would have had our first international competition being streamed live. And so we had people in Holland, Stulax being one of them. We had people in Norway We had people in the USA, in England, in Jamaica, right across the Caribbean, looking in and being a part of it. The potential to have 10,000 people looking at one boxing tournament and paying to look at that tournament and having advertisers working with us, it's the tip of the iceberg. And when you do something like when you have your sport being televised live, then sometimes if you don't have physical people in your arena, it's not much, because you've already made. And that is money that can be pumped back into your sport. We at this end of the Guyana Boxing Association, that is something our new Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Charles Ramson Jr., that is something that is one of his priorities, having our sport move from where it is into the future. And he wants to work with us. As a matter of fact, he has told me that he will be working with us in order to make us move into that direction. We've just had one football competition being streamed live. And when I say, because in Guyana, we don't have a lot of competitions being streamed live, but we had that football competition, which was sponsored by the government of Guyana, streamed live. And that is what will be happening when we get back on board after COVID would have released his hug on us. We'll be getting going straight into that.
Mhm. Well, there's also the issue as it relates to some years ago when boxing was a part of the Carifta Games.
We had a Carifta Games plan for last year, but COVID also killed that. We had a
right.
Carifta.
So I'm asking in relation to one, having boxing, making boxing, just as how we have the Carifta Swimming Championships, the Carifta Boxing Championships. And in addition to that, I think boxing was also slated to be part of the much talked about Caribbean Games. But then again, I think it was the pandemic. But how important you see boxing being part of the regional sporting landscape with championships like the Carifta and the Caribbean Games?
Well, I was not around at the time when boxing was part as an administrator. I'm a neophyte in relation to people like Cathy Harper Hall and Cecil Ford and these people. But I was not around when boxing was in Carifta. So I don't know much about it, but we had wanted to host a tournament last year. My hope is that if it is to be done, then it will have to have the collective support of the Caribbean region and the collective support. I'm sorry, I gotta be going back to that. The collective support is something that is very, very difficult to have. And I don't know who is going to try to sew us back together. That person will have his or her job cut out. But if we are able to achieve that, then the sky is the limit. We are a force to be reckoned with anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world, we are a force to reckon with. We turn and we look at Latin America and we want to know why Latin America is so successful. The basic reason is about the unity in Latin America. They will have their own little disputes at home, but they come out as a team. We see this in all the years. We've not been able, although the Caribbean has its strength, we've not been able to have someone from the English-speaking Caribbean as the president of AMBC. And we have all of that strength. And we are squandering it by our little petty fights about my muscles are big and I must be on top of this mountain and I must look down, and we're squandering it. And what happens after that is that you're turning people away. You're turning people away unknown to yourself that they're turning away. They're physically there, but they're mentally gone. And that showed its head at our last AIBA Congress. It showed its head at the last AIBA Congress because Umar Kremlev, whether you want to believe it or not, he had the majority of the English speaking Caribbean votes. He had the majority, but that was not to be. Many people thought that, somebody else would have gotten it, or who the IOC had selected would have gotten it. And need to just straight for a little while. Guyana took it a bit further as it relates to the IOC and whatsoever. We wrote to the IOC and said, listen, we had cogent conversations with a presidential candidate, and he claimed that the IOC had favored him and he's the light at the shining light at the end of the tunnel. So we, as Guyana, we would want to know if you do have a preferred candidate, who that preferred candidate is, because obviously we would want boxing to be back in the Olympic. If you can tell us your preferred candidate, then let us know. The IOC wrote back and said, well, listen, we don't have any preferred candidate. We are not getting into AIBA's business. But then we have administrators now saying, oh, the IOC said this and the IOC said that. And so I don't know who to believe. Should I believe the IOC or should I believe these other presidents? But hopefully, that the Caribbean as a region, although we are being knocked down, we can get up, we can be matured enough to allow bygones to be bygones. And we should, first and foremost, start putting our national federations in order. And then we could look at putting the Caribbean in order. Because it's no use our national federations are not in order, but we're hustling to get the Caribbean in order. I think that will be putting the cart before the horse. So my unsolicited suggestion and advice is that let's start at home. Make sure our homes are all right. And then collectively we can move to the Caribbean and make the Caribbean whole, somewhere comfortable and wholesome that we would all want to come home to.
Okay. Well, Stacey Correa is saying, well said, Mr. Ninvalle. And getting back to Andy's point, Andy, aka Stulax, to elaborate on my question, has boxing as a sport become political?
Well, I don't think there's any sport that is not political. The politics, when I got elected to the executive committee of AIBA in 2014, we went to South Korea. And that is when you could have felt the politics. I never knew it was like that, but you could have cut the politics in boxing. There's politics in every single sport, and that is why I quite understand where the IOC wants boxing to go, but that too I think is political, and we as members of the AIBA family must first turn and look to AIBA. It's about what boxing wants first, then about what any other person will want. But to answer Mr. Stulax, yes, very much alive and well in boxing as it is in all other sports.
Okay, then. Well, with less than 2 minutes remaining, probably a final word from you. But on that note also, what sort of message do you have for regional boxers? Not just the boxers in Guyana, but regional boxers with all that's going on, the pandemic in particular. How do they remain and stay focused?
Well, let me just say this quickly. When my boxers returned from Cuba after being there for 126 days, the first thing I did was to have them psychologically evaluated. And we will need to continue doing that because each and every one of us, even though we are not sportsmen per se, we are psychologically affected by the shutdown, the lockdown, the can't go, the mask on our face and so forth. So we will need to have them psychologically evaluated. I'd want to tell the boxers across the region, it may sound cliche, but you have to remain focused. You have to find a way of remaining focused. And our administrators will have to play a part in that. Regardless of how we do it, we have to find a way to make them remain focused. If not, we'll be losing our flock. and we've been elected to do that, and we must stand ground and do what we are elected to do.
Okay, then. Well said, and thank you very much, Mr. Ninvalle. I told you so. I told you so. Yeah, the time.
It went fast. It went very, very quick.
1 hour seems to be, on paper, it seems to be a lot, but it's definitely
there's so much more that we could have.
So much more to think. Definitely, we'll have to come back another time to
always
complete the discussion. Great talk tonight, Mr. Ninvalle. You are very well spoken. Honored to be part of the Guyana boxing team.
If I can just say this, Tavina Coombe is someone who Guyana had is selected to represent us at the Olympic qualifier. She's from Canada. Her father is a Guyanese, and she did not get a chance. And that is something too that I'm really, really disappointed about, because I know Tavina would have been the first Guyanese woman to go to the Olympics. But we still have time, Tavina. So keep focused.
Keep focused, Vina. You're one of those. And still have to say my compliments to Mr. Bascom for the manner in which you are hosting this interview, Steve. I'm really proud of you, my brother, and the manner in which you do your work. So indeed, Steve, and I do want to say that I've been following you for quite a while in terms of your deliberations, in terms of sports, not just boxing, but in terms of sports administration, because I think we need more of your sort of leadership. And well spoken. I also say the same thing to Brian Lewis of Trinidad and Tobago. We need people who are sports administrators and who can say it as it is. You
need to do that.
Despite, as you say, despite the consequences sometimes, I certainly knew that you would have been censured, but the fact is you have to say what is true and what is honest.
I embrace the consequences. And I must thank you very much, Michael, for having me on your program. Feel free at any other time. I'm always willing to come, and I have no boundaries as it relates to whatever questions. You can ask me anything at any time, and you will have the 110% honesty. That is what you will have.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much, my brother. Have a good night and stay safe.
All right, you too as well. Okay, then. So there you had it, folks. Steve giving us all it is from the East Bank Demerara in Guyana. He is the president of the Guyana Boxing Association. Yes, the president of the Guyana Boxing Association. And he's also the vice president of the Americas Boxing Confederation, and providing a very broad perspective of boxing, not just in Guyana, but in the Caribbean. Well said, Mr. Ninvalle. And as indicated, I hope to have you on the program in the future. And I do believe that those who have been watching and listening, you have been well served by Mr. Steve Ninvalle. Thank you once again. Don't forget to join us on Saturday from 1 o'clock for the Saturday Sports Special. We do expect to have a very interesting program as well on Saturday with folks from around the region. We expect to have some sports journalists as well joining us on the action. Until then, I want to wish you a pleasant evening, and also the invitation is yours to join me on Saturday from 1 o'clock in the afternoon for the Saturday Sports Special. I'm Michael Bascom. Thank you for viewing.